Good morning. Welcome back to Venture Daily, the fastest way to catch up on everything that matters in tech startups and venture capital.
Founders, funders, and fans of the future, this is your morning jolt of insight, news you can actually use, and guests who know their stuff. I'm Josiah Simons.
I'm Jackson Fordyce, and on today's show, Amazon is pouring $10 billion into North Carolina to supercharge its AI ambitions with massive new data centers.
Utah is teaming up with nuclear startup Valor Atomics to not only test a new reactor, but potentially manufacture next-gen TRISO fuel.
And Meta just cut a multi-billion-dollar deal to keep an Illinois nuclear plant alive and cleanly power its growing AI empire. It's Thursday, June 5th. Let's get you smarter before your first meeting. Looks like someone hit delete on a big chunk of history. A Reddit post set off alarm bells this week when all 5 volumes of the U.S. Senate's 2016 Russia election meddling report seemingly vanished from the Senate Intelligence Committee's website.
Yeah, the page just said no results found. Not exactly what you want when you're looking for evidence of foreign election interference.
Naturally, the internet sleuths went full CSI. The reports were still floating around, just hidden in a different part of the site on GovInfo. So not deleted, just reshelved quietly.
Still, it's raising eyebrows. This comes after a bunch of web pages have mysteriously disappeared under Trump's second term, especially anything tied to DEI, gender policy, or gun violence prevention.
The White House calls it routine maintenance. Critics call it selective memory.
As for the Russia report, no votes changed, no smoking gun conspiracy, but definitely extensive activity by Moscow to help Trump in 2016, and now apparently extensive activity to hide the receipts.
But hey, the White House says this is the most transparent administration in history. So transparent, you can't even see the documents.
All right. Before we jump in, I want to tell you about Public. Public.com. If you take investing seriously, you need to know about Public.com. That's where you can invest in everything: stocks, options, bonds, crypto. You can even earn some of the highest yields in the industry, like the 7% or higher yield. You can lock in with a bond account. Public is a FINRA-registered SIPC platform, SIPC insured platform that takes your investments as seriously as you do. Fund your account in 5 minutes or less at public.com/venture and get up to $10,000 when you transfer your old portfolio. Paid for by Public Investing. Full disclosure and podcast description down below. So wherever you are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, check out our link in the description, public.com/venture, and let the people at Public know who sent you. Really helps support the show.
100%. Yeah, let's hop into this first story today. Amazon is pouring $10 billion into North Carolina, and no, it's not for faster shipping.
It's all part of their AI arms race. Amazon is building massive new data centers in the Tar Heel state to keep pace with OpenAI, Google, and Microsoft.
This is just one piece of a much bigger picture. Amazon says it's planning up to $100 billion in capital spending this year, most of it going straight into AI infrastructure.
The North Carolina build-out alone will create 500 new jobs, and it comes just months after Amazon committed $11 billion more to data centers in Georgia.
Amazon CEO Andy Jassy called generative AI a once-in-a-lifetime business opportunity, and clearly the company is not holding back. Between custom chips like Trainium, their Bedrock marketplace, and that $8 billion Anthropic deal, Amazon's pushing hard to own the future of compute. For more on the story, I called Marc Freed-Finnegan.
Thanks so much for having me, Jackson. I'm psyched to be here. My name is Marc Freed-Finnegan. I'm co-founder and CEO of Chalk. We're a data platform for inference. So think of us as the next generation Databricks focused on those inference times data pipelines when you need to get really fresh data to your models to make those instant decisions.
I asked Marc, what makes the Tar Heel state a desirable location for Amazon to place its new $10 billion data center?
Yeah, it's funny. My very first job at Google was on Google's global infrastructure team. And so I started and they said, hey, Marc, we need some more capacity in Europe. Go. You can't say you work for Google. Find us some sites. And I was like, whoa, crazy. And so it's exciting. I think even back then that was exciting to find some effectively building a factory, right? You're looking for potentially hundreds of acres of land. You want the right tax environment. You need water, you need power, you need internet, you need a great workforce. And so it's really exciting to see a lot of this happening in the United States. Certainly North Carolina has made itself really hospitable to Amazon and others, both based on their tax environment and all of the other resources they bring to projects like this.
Turns out North Carolina checks every box: land, power, water, and a friendly tax code.
Right, and North Carolina isn't only good for Amazon. Amazon looks like it might be good for North Carolina, with its investments expected to create 500 jobs. And so I asked Marc, what kinds of jobs will those be? Operations, maintenance, AI engineering?
Yeah, I think that it's probably a mix. I am no longer the expert, but I think you probably see a mix of some highly skilled people and also some people who help to maintain what is in a lot of ways a factory, right? You have have kind of water and power and security and a lot of things that you need to take care of. So I think that Amazon is certainly probably talking mostly about the high skilled jobs and sort of the high tech things that they're doing. But really, you have a whole facility, probably a lot of land, and you've got a lot of things to maintain.
Makes sense. There'll be AI engineers, but also people keeping the lights on, the water flowing, and the servers humming. Josiah, in January, Amazon announced it would spend at least $11 billion in Georgia to build new data centers. Now, with the news of the North Carolina project, I asked Mark, does this signal a long-term commitment by AWS to establish the Southeast as a regional hub for AI infrastructure?
Who knows? I think that we're seeing data centers pop up all over the United States. I think a lot of it has to do with the states being friendly to companies like this, both in terms of tax environments, potentially in terms of some incentives. Also, you need to have power, and that's a really big driver of how you build a data center. I think what we've been really excited to see, obviously, the amount of compute allocated to AI is growing a huge amount. People are doing so much stuff. I think that historically, a lot of people have been talking about, wow, you need a ton of compute to train models. And people spend a ton of time and money training their models. I think what's really interesting and people are talking about a little bit less is that these days, the amount of compute being allocated to inference is exploding even faster than what's being allocated to training. What I mean is, you train a great model, but then you might want to run it again and again. Chalk is focused on the inference piece. So we love to see that kind of running that model, having great models that are optimized, that want to be really fresh with great data when people are clicking buttons, loading pages. That's where even more of the compute is going. So I kind of, from my past life, I'm excited to see all these new data centers coming online. And from my current life, I'm excited to see a lot of that compute is powering exactly the kind of things that we're working on at Chalk.
Mark and I's conversation ended with this question. How will Amazon's expansion in North Carolina impact competition with Microsoft, OpenAI, and Google in the AI infrastructure arms race?
Yeah, it certainly seems like compute is the name of the game. So we've definitely seen Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, Amazon, and others building huge data centers, installing massive numbers of computers to stay competitive. In a lot of ways, you look back and Google has a ton of computers and they have a lot of data. So you kind of hoped, or I don't know if you hope or not, but you could imagine Google having the early lead and sort of running away with the whole race. But that hasn't happened yet. Certainly, we shouldn't count them out. Google has all the resources you need, especially in terms of their data center and worldwide infrastructure. But obviously, Amazon has built a huge footprint as well. And we see companies, even with smaller footprints to start with, really leading the race in a lot of ways.
Now we're just waiting for Google's big $10 billion data center announcement in, I'm going to guess, Beaufort, South Carolina. Okay. That's my bet, Jackson. You'll be seeing the headline any week now.
Yeah, a good bet where our buddy Drew Knutson's probably from. Thank you to Marc Freed-Finnegan for joining the show today. All right, let's hop into our second story. Utah is making a bold move into nuclear. The state just inked a deal with Valor Atomics, a California startup, to bring a nuclear test reactor to Emery County. But that's just the beginning.
Yeah, the partnership isn't just about testing. It also opens the door to manufacturing nuclear fuel right here in the U.S. Specifically, they're looking at TRISO fuel, which the Department of Energy calls the most robust fuel on Earth. It's made from tiny poppy seed-sized particles of uranium wrapped in multiple protective layers, offering serious safety advantages over traditional fuel rods.
If it goes forward, Utah wouldn't just host the reactor. It could become a long-term hub for producing next-gen nuclear fuel. That's a big deal for national energy security, especially as data centers and AI push demand through the roof.
This plan is still early. A public memo shows that they're in the research phase, and everything would need to pass through strict Nuclear Regulatory Commission approval. But with new executive orders from President Trump aiming to fast-track advanced nuclear projects and streamline NRC review, the timeline could be shorter than expected.
Valor says its goal is to show nuclear tech can be built faster, safer, and at a lower cost. And with only one company in the U.S. currently licensed to make TRISO fuel, Utah stepping in would be a strategic move. If they pull this off, it could help the U.S. regain serious ground in energy leadership. For more on the story, I called Abe Murray.
Great to talk to you, everybody out there. I'm Abe Murray, general partner at Alleycorp.
I asked Abe, why is Utah interested in not only testing Valor's reactor, but also potentially producing nuclear fuel?
I'll step back and say human flourishing depends upon cheap energy, and we recognize that we just need more of it in this country. I'd say we've underinvested over time, and anybody paying attention understands that driving energy abundance drives human abundance, drives America doing well. If you look at people who want to build data centers, they want to build reindustrialize America, that's great. I want that. That all depends upon energy, and we know we're rate limited on energy. So any governor paying attention should want to do this. And I think especially in a state like Utah, which is, going way back to its founding, focused on building abundance out of a desert, right? They think hard about and care hard about how do we make energy happen in this state. And it's one thing to build the energy production assets, the nuclear reactors, the solar farms, whatever it is, but actually thinking a step beyond that and saying, what are the precursors to this, right? If you're going to create nuclear power plants, you also want to say, how do I create the fuel that powers those nuclear power plants? So I think that's pretty exciting.
Dang, that got me pumped, man. I feel like he said energy abundance is human flourishing.
Yeah.
And Utah's thinking long term, not just about power plants, but the fuel that they'll need decades from now.
Right. Utah doing what it does best, building abundance out of scarcity. They're not just saying, let's host a reactor. They're saying, how do we become essential to the entire nuclear ecosystem?
And speaking of nuclear ecosystems, 2 weeks ago, President Donald Trump signed executive orders instructing the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to accelerate the approval process for nuclear reactor testing and speed up the development of new nuclear power plants. And so I asked Abe, how does President Trump's recent executive order influence the timeline and feasibility of Valor's Utah project?
Yeah, and I love that you ask about timeline and feasibility, because if you're listening to the other shiny pods out there, All In and so on, people talk about nuclear and then in the same sentence they're like, but that's 10 years out, so we have to do natural gas. And I'll give you a headline, which is natural gas is actually rate limited on importing these turbines, and they're like 5 years out. They're scheduling to turn on new natural gas, and we're going to do it. Everybody needs to make more energy in every state of this, but Valor's actually looking at delivering electricity 3 years out. So Isaiah Taylor over there, he's a phenomenal human. We were proud to co-lead the seed round into them a year ago, and it's crazy what they've done in that year. They built in 1 year from like zero, like company instantiated, to under a year later, on time, under budget, scale thermal test unit, which they unveiled in LA. They've shown that they can move fast. We are not rate limited on the ability to build these reactors. We are rate limited on the willingness of humans to allow us to build these and ship them and deploy them. So that's why we're really excited about Utah and the governor and their exciting step to make this happen in their state. We can do it. And I really think that the president's mandate, this federal mandate to turn on 3 new nuclear reactors on U.S. soil by July 4th, a year from now, that's like a new Manhattan project for nuclear. And we think Valor Atomics is leading the way. They were the first to announce a site. They have a real reactor design, and they've proven that they can build to hit that deadline and are on track for it.
Wow. Abe saying that with Trump's executive order and Utah's backing, Valor could actually deliver power in just 3 years.
Dude, he's getting me pumped up. New Manhattan project goes hard. And Valor's already unveiled a working test unit under budget, ahead of schedule. As Abe said, the bottleneck now isn't tech, it's permission.
So my last question for Abe was this. Could this partnership position Utah as a long-term hub for advanced nuclear fuel production in the United States?
I would say absolutely yes. When we've been evaluating where do we build this fuel, the places that do it weren't really in the U.S. first. They've tended to be international. And it's great to see Trump's executive orders and the shift in the regulatory mentality and I'll just say the general sense of the populace, right? To understand that AI is the future. The people who own the machines that make the AI happen probably own a big piece of that future. And hey, we should do that in the US. And then the final takeaway is there's no way to do that without a ton of energy. So we need to be building nuclear here, and we need to be building that fuel here. And until all of these things changed, we just weren't, right? Nobody in the US was thinking about this. So I think Utah running fast ahead of this sets them up to be a big leader there, and love them sitting in the middle of the country just cranking out power for all of us. It's a beautiful picture in my head.
So sick. Shout out Abe Murray for being on Venture Daily today. All right, last story for this morning. Meta is doubling down on clean energy with a major new nuclear power deal. The Facebook parent just signed a 20-year agreement that keeps a massive Illinois nuclear plant running until 2047, 2 decades longer than originally planned.
That's huge, especially as tech giants like Meta race to power their AI infrastructure with reliable, zero-carbon energy. The Clinton Clean Energy Center provides enough electricity for over 800,000 homes, and this deal helps prevent its early retirement.
Also notable, if the plant had shut down in 2027 as planned, other energy sources like oil and gas would have filled the gap, and that would have added 34 million metric tons of CO2 emissions over 20 years. That's, quote, the equivalent to putting approximately 7.4 million gasoline-powered cars on the road for a year.
Whew. Meta's investment helps fund the plant's relicensing, keeping over 1,100 high-paying local jobs and millions flowing into the local economy. It's part of a growing trend where big tech is backing both existing reactors and new nuclear innovations to meet AI's massive power demands sustainably.
And with AI's appetite for electricity skyrocketing, these nuclear deals aren't just about clean energy. They're about securing the power that will fuel the future of computing. For more on the story, I called Jack Kennedy.
I'm Jack Kennedy. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO of Whippy. I think you had David, my co-founder, on last week. But Whippy is an all-in-one communication platform for both automated and AI communication for small and medium-sized businesses.
I asked Jack, why is Meta turning into nuclear energy to power its AI infrastructure instead of relying on traditional renewable sources like solar or wind?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, I think they're just hedging their bets, right? They're gonna do everything. It's not like they're just gonna do nuclear. The opportunity in front of them with AI is just so big. Same for a lot of other people, that they're just gonna pursue every avenue to cover all their bases. And like nuclear is just another one of those avenues that they want to have in their back pocket, right?
Covering all the bases makes sense. I also asked Jack, what makes the Clinton Clean Energy Center an attractive option for Meta's long-term energy needs?
Yeah, good question. I mean, maybe I'm being a bit cynical, but part of it is potentially the optics of it, right? Like when you're going into saying, hey, we're going to use nuclear, you want to have some clean element aspect of it as well. And like there are a lot of clean aspects to nuclear, right? But I think part of it is optics there, I think.
How crazy is it that in 2025, investing in nuclear energy is an optics play? It wasn't that long ago that distancing yourself from nuclear energy was the optics play.
Yeah, it's wild. Big tech companies are increasingly looking to nuclear, including small modular reactors, as part of their clean energy strategies. I also wanted to ask Jack, why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think they know that like, hey, if they can get this stuff online, right, it is a massive vector for scaling energy production. And that's what they need for AI and for cloud in general, right? But they know there's a big shortage, especially in the US. Like the demand is just for energy, it's going to outstrip the supply over the next decade. And nuclear is one of multiple good options to try and fill that gap.
The energy crunch is definitely looming, as data center energy use is expected to double by 2030. My last question for Jack was this. How might deals like this one reshape the economics and public perception of nuclear power in the United States?
The way Meta have gone about this, right, is they're actually trying to revive a plant that's been, from what I can tell, going to be shut down, right? So I think if they can come at it from that angle and say, look, hey, we're going to make the best of what we have, they can keep interest and keep people engaged and wanting to build more, right? So if they, first thing they're trying to do is keep the current stuff online, and then I think that will open them up to being able to have a conversation about adding more.
Thank you to Jack Kennedy for joining us on Venture Daily.
That's it for Venture Daily. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope we helped you get a little bit smarter today.
And thank you to Content Stack for letting us use your space to film here in Austin, Texas. If you like today's show, whether you're in YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or X, leave us a like, comment, and a review. Throw us a 5-star rating if you think we've earned it. And as always, we'll see you tomorrow morning for Venture Daily.